My name is Nate, and I run the overnight shift at a gas station off Route 9. It's out in the middle of nowhere, maybe 20 minutes from the nearest town, and yeah, I know how that sounds. 6 months ago, I would have laughed in your face if you told me this is where I'd end up. Now, I just do the job. But back then, I thought I was too good for this, if I'm being honest, because back then, I still had the excuse of thinking my life was going somewhere. I had a real job before, systems administrator at a software company, which means I was the guy who kept the servers running and the networks talking to each other, and the whole infrastructure doing what it was supposed to do, while everyone else took it for granted. I have a CS degree I'm still paying off, so that should tell you something about how well the invest in yourself plan worked out. Then they decided to outsource the whole department to some contractor in Austin, and that was it. 2 weeks severance and a handshake. Good luck out there. The job market was supposed to be hot for tech workers, at least according to every article I read while I was sitting on my sister's couch refreshing LinkedIn. You know how many of those articles mention that nobody wants to hire someone full time when they can get a contractor for half the price and no benefits? Zero. Not one. So I burned through the severance, then my savings, and ended up on that couch for real. My sister and her husband have a 2-bedroom, but their kids in the second room. So I got the living room and a couch that smells like dog. Even though they haven't had a dog in years. Maybe I'm the dog now. Her husband Derek works in sales. Never applied for a job in his life because his college roommate handed him one and he never left. But somehow he's an expert on what I should be doing with my career. Put yourself out there, Nate. Network, Nate. Real helpful advice from a guy who hasn't updated his resume since 2015. So I'm lying there one night, maybe 2 in the morning, and I can hear him through the wall talking to my sister in that voice people use when they want you to hear them, but also want to pretend they don't. Asking how much longer this is going to go on. And I'm scrolling through job listings on my phone, getting more pissed off by the minute when I see it. Gas station off Route 9. Overnight shift, 11 to 7. $14 an hour. I almost scrolled past it. Overnight at a gas station on some state highway sounded like a punishment, not a job. But I sat there doing the math anyway because that's what desperation does to you. 14 an hour, 40 hours a week, and in about 3 weeks, I'd have $3,200. First month, last month, security deposit, my own place. A door between me and Derek's voice that I could close whenever I wanted. I could deal with anything for 3 weeks, so I applied that night and they called me the next morning. The interview was weird. The manager brought me into this little office behind the counter, and he's this older white guy, maybe 60, smells like old coffee and motor oil, looks like the station grew around him. He picked up my application and put it back down without reading it, and then he just asked me 3 things. Can I work alone? Can I follow directions exactly? And do I scare easily? That last one should have been a red flag, right? But I was so sick of Derek and his couch and his opinions and waking up every morning in a house where I was the problem that needed solving. So when the manager slid a stack of paperwork across the desk, I signed where the tabs were and didn't read a word of it. My whole career, I read every line of every contract I ever signed. Server agreements, NDAs, all of it. This one time I didn't, because I just wanted to stop being the charity case sleeping in someone else's living room. He nodded and told me to come back Monday at 11, back entrance. That was the whole thing. My first night, I pulled into the lot around 11:15 and just sat there in my car for a minute. The station looked like every gas station you've ever driven past and forgotten about. Pretty much where I was at in life. So fitting. Just a building with a glass front and a neon sign buzzing open 24 hours that couldn't hold steady for more than a few seconds at a time. Nothing wrong with any of it, but there was this feeling I couldn't shake sitting out there in the dark. Like the building knew I was in the parking lot before I'd made up my mind to go in. I don't know how else to put it. I told myself that was stupid and got out of the car. The manager was behind the counter when I walked in, and he pointed at things for about 5 minutes like I was a golden retriever learning the house. Register here, coffee machine behind you, bathroom in the back, cooler along the wall. 5 years managing enterprise server infrastructure, and this guy was explaining to me where the bathroom was. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a laminated card. He told me these were the rules and I should follow them. There was a book under the counter if I needed it, and he pointed at a shelf where a beat-up binder sat next to some old newspapers and cleaning supplies. Rules for gas station. Sure. Before I could ask what any of that meant, he grabbed his jacket and walked past me toward the door. I asked if that was it, and he stopped with his hand on the glass and he looked at me. You'll figure it out. Then he was gone. Car started up in the lot and pulled away, and the door swung shut behind him. The bell above it chimed once, and the store went quiet. 11 o'clock, 8 hours ahead of me. Just me, the register, and whatever was on this card. I flipped the card over and then back again. 3 rules, typed out and numbered, on a laminated card for a gas station. Somebody actually typed these up and laminated them, like this place was a nuclear facility and not a building that sells cigarettes and energy drinks to people who made bad decisions about their evening. Rule 1. Stay behind the counter during your shift. The counter is your station. Fine. Common sense. Don't wander around. Stay at your post. I wasn't planning on exploring the place. Rule 2. Complete all transactions. Ring it up, bag it, say goodnight. Do not refuse service. Sure, that's the job. Someone wants a candy bar at midnight, you sell them the candy bar. I didn't need a laminated card to tell me that. Rule 3. If you don't recognize a customer, check the book under the counter. That one stopped me. I read it again and it still didn't make sense because this was a gas station off a state highway and I wasn't going to recognize anybody. Every customer who walked in was going to be a stranger, so was I supposed to check this book every single time? And what was in it? A list of regulars? A customer database? That's not a thing gas stations have. The whole card was 3 rules long, and the first 2 were just do your job. So why was the third one pointing me at a book like something was going to walk in that I need instructions for? I looked over at the shelf where the manager had pointed. The binder was still sitting there, cracked plastic cover, yellowed at the edges, wedged between some old newspapers and a bottle of glass cleaner. It looked like it had been there since before I was born. I could have opened it, probably should have, but I figured it was an employee manual or inventory sheets or some other thing I didn't need right now. And honestly, I wasn't about to sit here reading a binder at 11 at night like I was studying for a test. I had a CS degree. I could figure out a cash register. So I put the card down next to the register and looked around. The station was quiet. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the buzz of the coolers along the wall. And outside, I could see the pumps lit up under the canopy with the highway running past them dark and empty. A car went by every few minutes, headlights sweeping across the lot, but nobody pulled in. Just me and the register and that hum. 8 hours of this. I mean, get paid, go home, do it again tomorrow. Maybe this job was just going to be boring, and boring I could handle, because boring was a massive improvement over Derek's couch. I leaned back against the counter and waited. Then the bell above the door rang, and someone walked in. Okay, so, a man in jeans and a flannel shirt. Nothing special about him. He walked past the counter without looking at me and headed toward the back of the store. And my first thought was robbery, right? Because that's what you'd think when someone walks into a gas station in the middle of the night and doesn't make eye contact. But he just went right past me like I was part of the furniture, which honestly, fair enough. First customer of my brilliant new career. Fantastic. He stopped in front of one of the shelves near the back and picked up a quart of motor oil, and then he just stood there turning it over and examining the label like he was selecting a wine and not a $3 bottle of 10W30 at midnight. People buy weird things at weird hours, right? That's the entire business model of a place like this. So I waited for him to finish his connoisseur moment and come to the counter. He put the motor oil down in front of me, and that was when I noticed his hands. I'm not someone who normally pays attention to a stranger's hands, but these were wrong. Too smooth. No wrinkles, no veins, nothing. Just this flat skin that looked like it had never been used for anything. Mannequin skin on a guy who otherwise looked completely normal. I stared at them for probably a second too long before I made myself look up because, maybe the guy just moisturizes and I'm being weird about it. Good for him. Skincare routine of a champion. Then I looked at his face and forgot about the hands. His eyes were wrong. Left one was locked on me, right one was drifting somewhere past my shoulder, and neither one knew the other existed. I've never had someone look at me and not look at me at the same time before, and I hope I never do again. I scanned the motor oil and told him $3.99, and he didn't blink the entire time. I know because I stopped breathing and just watched. He pulled out some bills and handed them over, and the money felt wrong too. Stiff in a way that bills never are, and the green was off by just enough to notice but not enough to point at and say that's fake. But everything was where it was supposed to be. Washington in the middle, serial numbers and all. I've gotten worse bills from vending machines. So I put it in the register and counted out his change, $1 and a penny, and held it out. His fingers brushed mine when he took it, and they were freezer cold. I don't mean chilly, I mean cold like something that's never been warm. I pulled my hand back way too fast, grabbed the bag from under the counter, put the motor oil in it, pushed it across and said, "Have a good night." Because that's what you say, right? Someone buys something, you say have a good night, even when your hand is still tingling and the rest of you is trying real hard not to think about why. He said thank you, except his mouth moved after the words came out. Not at the same time, after. The sound happened first, and then his lips caught up half a second later, and the voice was flat, nothing behind it at all. Like a recording playing through speakers that happened to be shaped like a mouth. I don't know how else to describe it. And I was still trying to file all of that under weird but explainable when he smiled. The smile started normal, corners going up, fine, but they didn't stop. They kept going, past where a mouth should end, stretching the face wider than any face should go, and I could see too many teeth in there, rows of them, small and white and going back further than made any kind of sense. And I couldn't move. My hands were flat on the counter and my feet were on the floor, and I just stood there. 3 feet from something that was smiling at me with a mouth that didn't work right anymore, waiting for whatever was about to happen because I couldn't move. I wanted to. I couldn't. He picked up the bag. Then he turned to leave, except his head went first, just ahead. His shoulders were still facing me when his head was already pointed at the door, and then his shoulders caught up, and then his hips, and then his legs, and I'm standing there watching this guy walk away from me in pieces. Nothing about the way he moved to the door looked like it belonged to the same body. The bell rang and the door closed, and he was gone. I don't know how long I stood there after. A minute, maybe more. My hands were shaking and my heart was going so hard I could feel it in my throat. And I'm just standing there behind the counter in this gas station thinking, what the hell was that? What the actual hell was that? So I made it fit. The guy was on something. Drugs. Some kind of condition. Bad lighting and shaky nerves, making everything look worse than it was. Cold hands and a weird smile. That's a Tuesday at a gas station. Not a reason to freak out. People are weird. Midnight makes them weirder. I closed the register, took a breath. Told myself it was a one-time thing. It was not. Maybe 20 minutes later, the bell rang again. I'd spent those 20 minutes reorganizing the cigarette display behind me, which didn't need reorganizing, but it gave me something to do with my hands and a reason to not look at the door. The motor oil guy was explainable. Had to be. I just needed a few minutes of quiet and some meaningless busy work, and everything would settle back down to boring. The bell rang and I turned around, and it was a kid. 8, maybe 9 years old. Red jacket, sneakers, hair that needed cutting. Just a kid standing in the doorway of a gas station at midnight, which, yeah, that's weird on its own. But weird, I could work with. Weird was an upgrade from whatever the last guy was. Maybe his parents were at the pumps. Maybe he wandered in from one of the houses back in the trees. Kids do things like that. He went straight to the candy aisle, grabbed the Snickers, and brought it to the counter. Didn't hesitate, didn't browse, just knew what he wanted and came to get it. Put $1 down and said, "Just this, please," and his voice was normal too. Normal voice, normal face, normal everything. I scanned the bar, made change, a penny and a nickel, and set it on the counter. The whole transaction took maybe 30 seconds and nothing about it was wrong. Hands fine, eyes fine, the way he moved completely ordinary. A kid buying a candy bar at a gas station. And I was already feeling stupid for how hard my pulse was going because this was fine, right? This was completely... I glanced at the front window. It was dark outside, which meant the glass was basically a mirror, and in the reflection, I could see the counter and the register and me standing behind it, and where the kid should have been, there was something else. Tall. Taller than me. Taller than the shelves. A dark shape that didn't have edges so much as suggestions of edges. And where the arm should have been, there were these long, dark things reaching out, curling in the air, stretching across the counter toward where I was standing. Toward me. Slow. Like they had all the time in the world. I looked at the kid. Just a kid, waiting for his change with his hand out, and that patient look kids get when adults are being slow. I looked at the window. The shape was closer. The dark things were longer. One of them was almost touching my reflection's shoulder. The kid said, "Thanks, mister," and picked up his change and walked to the door. And in the window's reflection, the tall shape turned with him, folding those long, dark limbs around itself as it moved. And I watched it pass through the doorway with something trailing behind it, curling once around the frame before it pulled free and disappeared into the dark. The bell chimed. The door swung shut. The reflection was just me again. Just the counter and the register and the fluorescent lights and a guy standing very still with a nickel he'd forgotten to put in the drawer. I couldn't explain that one away. I tried. Bad angle, tired eyes, the light playing tricks, and none of it worked because I saw it twice. Looked away and looked back, and it was still there. Still reaching, still real. Whatever that kid was, the window knew, and I didn't. And now, every piece of glass in this building was something I couldn't stop watching. That was when I started checking the reflections. Every window, every surface, every time the cooler doors caught the light at the right angle. Because the thing standing in front of you might not be the thing that's actually there. My hands were still shaking from the kid, and I couldn't make them stop. So I shoved them in my pockets and stood there behind the counter, watching the dark outside the windows. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the lot, right where the canopy light gave up and the dark started, something was standing there. Tall. Too tall. The proportions wrong in a way I couldn't pin down, because my eyes wouldn't stay on it long enough to measure. Shoulders too narrow for the height, and the head, if that's what it was, tilted at an angle that would have snapped the neck. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there facing the station, and I couldn't tell if it had been there for 5 seconds or the entire night. I stared at it, tried to focus, tried to get my eyes to actually lock onto whatever I was looking at instead of sliding off the edges. I blinked. It was inside. It didn't walk in. The bell didn't ring. It was just standing at the counter, 3 feet in front of me, and the air in the room went heavy, compressed, like there was more in that space than what I was seeing. The overhead lights dimmed, just pulling back, something drawing the power out of the room. I tried to look at his face, and I couldn't. My eyes would get close and then slide off, the way your gaze skips past something you're not supposed to see. I couldn't tell you if there was a face there or not. Couldn't tell you what color it was, or what it was wearing, or anything about it other than it was tall, and it was close, and the air around it felt wrong. And I was gripping the edge of the counter so hard, my knuckles ached. It spoke. "Excuse me, do you carry road maps?" Polite, calm. You could hear every syllable perfectly, which is the thing that was wrong with it. Nobody talks that clean. No ums, no breath, no mouth sounds. Just words coming out one after the other, with nothing human in between. And it was coming from something I couldn't look at, standing in a spot it reached without using the door, asking me about road maps at 1 in the morning. I had to answer. That was the job, right? Complete all transactions. Don't refuse service. So I pointed toward the rack by the door because my voice wasn't going to work. And I kept my eyes on the counter because looking at this thing was trying to read a word that kept rearranging itself. It moved away from the counter. I heard it pick something up. Then it came back and put a road map down in front of me, and I scanned it without looking up. Put money on the counter, made change, bagged the map, and pushed it across. I kept my eyes on my hands the whole time because I was afraid of what I'd see if I looked anywhere else. The thing took the bag. I heard it walk to the door, and the bell rang on its way out. The bell that never rang when it came in. The door swung shut and I was alone, and for about 30 seconds, nothing happened. I just stood there, quiet store, hum of the lights coming back to full, my hands flat on the counter. Then the shaking started in my fingers and moved up to my arms and into my chest, and my legs went next, and I couldn't stand there anymore. I couldn't be in this building for one more second, because no amount of money is worth whatever the hell just happened in the last hour of my life. And Derek's couch is fine. Derek's couch is great, actually. I'll sleep on that couch forever if it means I never have to stand behind this counter again. I grabbed my keys off the shelf, came around the counter, and hit the door. The air outside hit me wrong. Cold and heavy and pressing in. And the dark past the canopy wasn't just dark. There were things in it. I could feel them the way you feel someone staring at you. That pressure on the back of your neck. Except it was coming from everywhere at once. The pumps, the tree line, the road. I didn't care. I was done. My car was at the far end of the lot and I ran for it, and I could feel all of it pressing in around me, but I just kept running because I needed to be in my car with the doors locked and the engine on and gone. 30 feet. 20. I hit the unlock button while I was running, and the headlights flashed once and the car beeped, and I grabbed the door handle and got in and pulled it shut and started the engine. The dashboard lit up. The vents kicked in. I put it in reverse and looked at the rear view mirror, and I was behind the counter. My hands were flat on the surface. The car was gone. The parking lot was gone. All of it. I was standing exactly where I'd been standing before I ran. Like the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. And my keys were in my pocket, even though I could still feel the door handle in my palm. Could still feel the steering wheel. Could still hear the engine turning over. But I was here, behind the counter, in the store. And there was a piece of paper in front of me that hadn't been there before. My contract. The one I signed in my manager's office without reading. The one with the tabs, where I just scribbled my name because I wanted off Derek's couch so bad I didn't care what the fine print said. It was sitting on the counter, open to a page I'd never looked at, and one line was glowing, actually glowing, soft and warm, like the words themselves were lit from inside. Term, 90 shifts. Employee may not terminate contract prior to completion of all scheduled shifts. I read it again and again. 90 shifts, not 3 weeks. 90 shifts. That's 4.5 months of overnights at a gas station where things teleport through walls and children have tentacles in the mirror and the building can put you back where it wants to if you try to leave. I signed this. I didn't read it and I signed it because I was angry and proud and too good to read the fine print on a gas station job, and now I was standing behind a counter that wouldn't let me go. The binder was still on the shelf under the register. The one the manager had pointed at on my first night. The one I'd ignored because rules for a gas station were beneath me. I pulled it out and opened it, and the first page was a hand-drawn sketch of something tall and thin with no face. And underneath it, in a handwriting that wasn't the manager's, someone had written, "The tall one. Point. Don't speak." I pointed. When it asked about road maps, I pointed at the rack because I was too scared to talk, and that turned out to be the right thing to do by accident. Point, don't speak. I followed the rule without knowing it existed because my voice shut down and my body did what my brain couldn't. But if I'd been braver, if I'd managed to get a word out, asked it what it wanted, or told it to get the hell out of my store, I don't know what would have happened, and I don't want to know. I would have known all this if I had opened this book an hour ago instead of deciding I was too smart for it. I turned the page. More entries. Different handwriting, different ink, some of them decades old. People who worked this counter before me, writing down what they'd learned, so the next person wouldn't have to learn it the hard way. I'd already learned it the hard way. I was reading everything 30 seconds too late. The bell rang. I still had the binder open, and when the bell rang, one of the pages started glowing. Soft, warm, the same way the contract had, words glowing from inside the page. I flipped toward it and the glow got brighter, page after page, past entries I didn't have time to read, until I landed on a sketch of a man in a flannel shirt, smiling. Whoever drew it had gone over the smile 3 or 4 times in heavy ink, really bearing down on it, like that was the part that mattered. Underneath, the talker. Ignore everything except the transaction. Don't answer, don't react, don't argue. Scan, bag, good night. It's testing you. Underneath that, in different ink, someone else had added one word. Don't. Nothing about what happens if you engage. Just commands in capital letters and a warning from someone who'd stood there where I was standing and pressed hard enough to almost tear the page. I closed the binder and looked up. A man in a flannel shirt was browsing the chip rack, smiling. Same flannel, same smile. I looked down at the sketch and back up, and it was the same face, which meant previous employees had seen this exact thing standing in this exact store, looking exactly like this, and they'd drawn it so the next person would know. He grabbed a bag of Doritos, looked at it, put it back, grabbed a different one, and came to the counter, smiling the whole time. Just a friendly, easy smile, the kind you'd get from anyone buying chips at 1 in the morning, except it never changed and it never stopped. I scanned the chips, and he started talking. Must be rough, he said, the overnight. Derek's couch wasn't great either, but at least you could sleep there. My hand stopped on the bag, and the voice just kept going, through sentences, through breaths it never took. One thought feeding into the next, like something that I memorized the script but never learned that humans need air. He feels bad for you, you know, Derek. That little wince he does when you leave the room, like you drove past an accident. It picked up the Doritos bag and turned it over in his hands while it talked. Same flat stream, no break between thoughts. 80,000 for the degree, give or take, and you're scanning chips. My jaw locked. I put the chips in the bag because that's what the binder said to do. And the whole time this thing is standing 3 feet away, saying out loud the exact thoughts I have at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep on Derek's couch. Word for word. Like it had been in my head and took notes. Your dad stocked shelves, it said, and the smile stayed exactly where it was. 31 years at the same store. Came in before sunrise, left after dark, and nobody who shopped there ever learned his name. Customers walked past him like he was part of the shelving, and he came home every night smelling like cardboard and floor wax, and he never once complained about it because that's who he was, the guy who just shows up. I hit the total button. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out flat, and I have no idea how. $3.49. It put a 5 on the counter. I made change, put it in the man's hand. Warm, normal, could have been anyone's hand. And I kept my eyes on the register because looking at this thing's face was going to break me. You were 15. Still that same even stream. Still no breath between words. Watching him come home like that every night, and you decided that was never going to be you. The degree was never about computers. It was about not becoming him. You looked down on him, your own father. The voice kept the same flat delivery through every word. Sat at his funeral thinking, at least that's not me. And now you're behind the counter at 2 in the morning, making change for something that isn't human. It clicked its tongue. The way a grandmother would, scolding a kid who tracked him out on the carpet. Such a bad son, right? Man pushed through everything to give you a life, and you couldn't even respect what it cost him. He'd be so proud of you right now. My throat closed up, because every word was true. And I don't mean close to true. I mean true. The stuff you bury so deep, you forgot you put it there. I looked down at my father. I did. I loved him, but I looked down on him. Never said it out loud. Never even let myself think it on purpose. And this thing in a flannel shirt said it like I was reading off a receipt. Have a good night, I said. It stood there for one more second, and I could feel it waiting, giving me one last opening to say something back. To be a person instead of a cashier. To tell it that I didn't know a goddamn thing about my father. I didn't take it. The bell rang on its way out and the door swung shut, and I was alone. I was shaking, hands, arms, all of it. So I put them flat on the counter and just stood there, because there was nothing else to do except wait for it to pass. The store was quiet, lights humming, coffee pot glowing on the burner, the register showing $0 and waiting for the next transaction. Everything I said was true, and I didn't answer. Long time before my hand stopped. Long enough for the quiet to change. And I know how that sounds, but the silence at the beginning of the night had weight to it, things hiding in it and pressing against the windows. This quiet was just empty. The normal kind. The kind a gas station is supposed to have at 3 in the morning when nobody's buying anything. I'd held. First time all night, I stayed put, kept my mouth shut, and did the job the way the binder said to do it. Scan, bag, good night. My dad did that for 31 years. I'd done it once and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The rest of the night was just a night. I don't know how long I stood there after the talker left. Long enough for the shaking to stop and for the store to turn back into a store. Just lights and coffee and a register waiting for the next transaction like nothing had happened. I went back to the Logbook, and this time I wasn't desperately flipping through pages hunting for whatever was about to kill me. I was just reading. Decades of entries in different handwriting from people who'd stood where I was standing. One entry was just a drawing of a coffee pot with a smiley face and the words, "It's fine," underneath. Honestly, at 4 in the morning after the night I'd had, it was pretty funny. Dawn came in slow. I didn't notice it at first because the fluorescents were already on. But at some point, the parking lot outside the windows went from black to gray to that flat early morning nothing where everything looks washed out and ordinary. A car pulled in around 6:30. A woman, maybe 40, wearing scrubs and a jacket that didn't match. She walked in, went straight for the coffee, filled a cup, brought it to the counter, and paid without looking at me. Routine. She'd done this 1,000 times. Then a guy came in from the back. Day shift, I figured, because he had a key and he didn't use the front door. Younger than me, ball cap, thermos. He put his stuff behind the counter and looked at me the way you look at someone who just finished something you've finished before. He didn't ask how my night was. He already knew. I clocked out, grabbed my jacket, and walked across the lot. My car was right where I left it, 30 feet from the door. And in daylight, the distance was nothing, just a parking lot. Last night, that 30 feet was the longest distance in the world, and I couldn't make it across. This morning, I walked it without thinking. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before I started the engine. Derek's house was 20 minutes away, and I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do when I got there. Walk in, kick off my shoes, lie down on the couch that smells like a dog they don't have, and just, what, go to sleep? Act like the last 8 hours were normal? Derek would be eating breakfast. He'd ask how the shift went in that voice he uses, the one where he already thinks he knows the answer. I drove there anyway, pulled into the driveway and sat in the truck with the engine off. My dad came home from work every day for 30 years and never once talked about it. I used to think that meant there was nothing to talk about. Now, I think maybe there was plenty, and he just knew nobody would believe him. I went inside and slept, came back the next night, and the night after that. That was how it started. The next few weeks were just shifts. I mean, things happened. Things came in. I sold them stuff, checked the logbook, did the transaction, said goodnight. But it stopped being every encounter as a crisis and started being more like a rhythm. You learn the rhythm or you don't, and I guess I learned it. The mimic came back on Tuesday. Motor oil, mannequin hands sliding the bottle across the counter, that smile that doesn't move right. All of it exactly like the first time. By the third week, I had the bag ready before the bell finished ringing. The smile that froze me solid on night one is just how its face works. That's the only smile it has. I don't think about it anymore. The kid kept showing up for candy bars. Thanks, mister, every time. Exact change, little wave on the way out. At some point, I stopped checking the window for the reflection because it doesn't matter. Whatever's underneath the normal-looking kid with the candy bar, it pays, says thanks, leaves, and that's more than I can say for some of the living customers I dealt with at my old job. Tuesday guy, Marlboro Reds, exact change, never speaks. He comes in at the exact same time every week so consistently I started using him as a clock. If Tuesday guy's here, it's 1:40. One night, maybe week 4, he nodded at me on the way out. Just a small dip of the chin, barely anything. I nodded back. That's our whole relationship, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't one of the more stable ones I've had recently. Then, there was the old man. Came in looking for a newspaper that hadn't been printed since 1987. I looked it up later. The whole paper folded in 88. First time he asked, I told him we didn't carry it, and his face just fell apart, like the world had moved on without telling him, and the newspaper was the last thing he was holding on to. So the next week, I found a stack of old papers at a thrift store for $2 and put one behind the counter. He came in, I handed it to him, and he said, "Thank you, son," in this quiet voice, and paid with coins so cold they burned my palm. He does this every week now. I buy the papers, he picks one up, he calls me son, and I let him because it stopped hurting around week 3. I'd like to tell you I do it because it saves me 30 seconds of him standing there confused, but you and I both know that's not why I do it. One night I was flipping through the lore book and found an entry about the mimic that had the timing wrong. Said it came in after 3 a.m., but it's always before 2. I grabbed a pen and corrected it without thinking. Sat there for a minute, looking at my own handwriting next to entries from the 90s, then closed the binder and made coffee. The $3,200 was saved. Had been for a while. I could put down the deposit, sign a lease, sleep in a bed that didn't smell like a ghost dog. I told myself I'd do it next week. Then I told myself that again. Then I stopped telling myself anything and just kept showing up. One night, the day shift guy moved my stuff. My pen, my mug, the spot where I keep the old man's newspaper. A small thing, shouldn't have mattered. I put everything back before my shift started, and I was annoyed about it for 3 hours, which is way too long to be upset about a pen, and I knew that, and I was still annoyed. My dad went to the same place every day for 30 years. I used to think that was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. I don't know what I think about it now. The 90th shift ended on a Wednesday morning. I clocked out, drove home, and sat in my apartment doing nothing for a while. Then I drove back to the station that night. Nobody told me to. The contract was done, 90 shifts completed, every one of them, and the tally under the counter had my mark next to it. I could have called the manager and told him I was finished, and that would have been that. My life would have gone back to whatever it was going to be, updating my resume, applying for real jobs, listening to Derek tell me over dinner at my sister's that he always knew I'd figure it out. I got behind the counter, put my hands flat on the laminate, warm, the way it always is when nothing's wrong, and made coffee even though nobody was going to buy it for hours. There are practical reasons I stayed. Night differential adds up. I already knew the system, the regulars, the logbook. Training someone from scratch would take weeks, and they'd probably quit after the first night anyway. I stayed because it's efficient and I'm good at it, and finding another job that pays me this well with this little supervision would be stupid when I already have one. Those are the reasons I'd give you, and they're all true, and none of them are why I'm still here. I signed a new contract, different terms. I run the overnight now, which means I write the laminated cards for the new hires, keep the lore book updated, take the call when somebody's first night goes sideways. The guy with the CS degree who thought overnight cashier was a cosmic insult is now the person who makes sure the overnight cashier doesn't die. The lore book has more of my handwriting in it than anyone else's at this point. I tell you that's because the previous entries were sloppy and incomplete, which they were. I would not tell you that I spent 2 hours on the talker's page making sure whoever reads it next understands exactly what they're dealing with, because that would sound like I care and I'm just doing documentation. My dad worked the same job for 30 years and nobody noticed until he was gone. I'm not saying this is the same thing. I'm saying I get it now. You show up, you do the work, you go home, you come back. And if you're lucky, you leave behind something so the next person doesn't have to figure it all out alone. I'm behind the counter right now, my mug, my pen, the old man's newspaper, ready on the shelf. Coffee pot's full, bell will ring when it rings. I don't check the clock anymore.